Welcome to the Anti-Architect Podcast. I am your host, Christian Giordano. As president and owner of the design firm Mancini Duffy, I am driven by a quest for learning and radically changing the industry. With this podcast, I'm hoping to improve the industry that I'm so passionate about by taking a critical look at how architects work through a variety of voices and shared experiences. Hello, Anti-Architect Podcast listeners. I'm excited to have Michael Abboud as my guest here in our Red Bank studio on the Anti-Architect Podcast. Michael Abboud stands at the forefront of digital transformation as the CEO of TetherView, a leading provider in digital workplace solutions. Under his leadership, TetherView has become synonymous with innovation, offering secure and efficient digital environments that empower businesses to thrive in the digital age. With a keen eye for potential, Michael was instrumental in the revitalization of Fort Monmouth, transforming this historic site into a bustling center for commercial and residential development. Residing in Oceanport, New Jersey, Michael's commitment extends beyond business. Michael is an advocate for live, work, play philosophy, championing community engagement and supporting local enterprises. Michael Abboud's career is a testament to his ability to turn visionary ideas into reality, making significant contributions to both real estate and the digital workplace sectors. We also share a personal connection as our children attend the same school, and we are both members of the Young Presidents Organization, YPO. Michael, I really appreciate you being here and taking the time with your busy schedule to be my guest here on the Anti-Architect Podcast.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we've known each other a while now. So I thought I'd start with sort of how we first met. And, you know, we met at a school function, I think, and you told me you're buying Russell Hall, which was at and parts of Fort Monmouth, which is located in a former fort called Fort Monmouth. And I just thought I'd kind of bring up, just to set the scene for those that don't know, Fort Monmouth is an old Army fort in Monmouth County, New Jersey. It's over 1,200 acres. It spans across two towns. One town's called Eatontown. The other one is Oceanport. It's 5 miles from the beach and about an hour from New York City. It was known as the headquarters for the U.S. Army Communications Electronics Command, or CECOM. And there were all sorts of cool inventions there, like FM radio, radar, walkie-talkies, night vision goggles, pretty crazy stuff. Advancements in radar. There was the whole Soviet spy scandal that actually happened there. A lot of interesting history. And it was operational from 1920, and then it was shut down, sort of a Army reorganization in 2011. Now it's been in the spotlight for the redevelopment for over a decade. And the big news is that Netflix is planning to set up a huge, production campus across 300 of the acres. So how did someone like you on the tech side, medical side, have the smarts to snag a piece of Fort Monmouth before any of this was going on?
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I do things that no one else wants to do. People think I'm crazy for doing. So when I bought Russell Hall, which is the former headquarter building for Fort Monmouth, the gates were closed, for the base. And the grass was about 4 feet tall. My only neighbors were about 600 deer, some crazy fox that were running around the place. And you'd have to go through the gate and show a pass to get through the gate and get to the building. And it's a 100-year-old building. The building was commissioned and first used in the early 30s. And it's going to be 100 years old, in 10 years. It's about 90 years old here today. And so, the reason I bought it is I live a mile and a half away from the building. And I had just exited from my healthcare business and started TetherView about a year prior, knew that I wanted to go into TetherView and recognized that having offices in Dallas, in Nashville, in New York City was not conducive to a happy lifestyle. And so I bought the building, making it home for TetherView, and we were excited to be there, and slowly renovated it. Right. So recognize that we're in Monmouth County where it's dense. There's no way to make land there. And all of a sudden we created 1,200 acres of property. And it was a slow go. I think I was the last organization to buy a contract from the Army. After that, the county very astutely bought the remaining of the property from the Army, and they disposed of it through this organization called Femera, which has been great to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. But what? So how do you know that the building's for sale? How do you what's that process? You just see it and you're like, hey, I'd like to buy that building, or what? You didn't have really development experience before that, right?
I was developing about 2 projects every 4 or 5 years. I'd buy a piece of real estate and invest, and I just love the fact I found out about it just because you're in the area, you're reading articles, and I bid on it, and I bid on it. I bid a number that I said, hey, if I get this is a no-lose situation. And miraculously enough, nobody else bid against me. And so when no one else bids against you, you're kind of like, wait, what is going on? What do they know that I don't know? Because I never assume I'm the smartest guy in the room. But I just looked at it and said, I want to be close to home. This is eventually going to be something, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be worth something. And so just running around the neighborhood, reading about the fort, understanding what they were trying to do at the time, I thought it was a good investment. No one else did.
Clearly it was.
Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
That was about 8 years ago.
8 years, okay.
Yeah, well before Netflix. So there's a pre-Netflix and post-Netflix kind of.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll get into the rest of the parcels that you bought in a little bit. So kind of talking about architects and obviously the Anti-Architect podcast, if you had to pick one thing, what annoys you about working with an architect?
The lack of common sense sometimes.
Okay, I like that.
Right? And not Mancini. I have to tell you, this is not a plug, right?
Yeah, listen.
I've been working with Scott. Shout out to Scott and Brian and Colin. Those guys are awesome. I really enjoy working with them. But historically, working with architects, just not putting together either a financial reality to a project or not looking at the physical constraints and maybe over-promising to their client, I'm going to make this look beautiful, and again, maybe financial, but more about just, hey, I've got beams here and it's a 100-year-old building. I can't move them. We have to work around them. So What frustrates me about architects is just that lack of common sense sometimes.
Yeah, trying to push their own vision no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah, I get it. So in your experience, you've encountered situations where the architect's vision is really complex, right? And maybe they overthink things. How do you address that?
Being a little bit of a bully, unfortunately, sometimes, right? You can't always be pleasant, right? And you have to understand where's the architect coming from. Ask the questions because I'm a very common sense kind of guy. I'm going to use that word a lot, unfortunately, here. And architects tend to be more artistic. And so it's just finding that common ground. Like, what are they seeing that I don't see?
Right.
And why are they saying to, create a certain style versus, I want something maybe a little different.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've noticed about you is that you're also very good about giving criticism, right? And so how do you, when an architect comes and, shows all this stuff and there's all these renderings and you could tell they've put so much work into this and you're like, I don't know, that's not really how do you, I envy that of you because I'm too nice, right? I'll say oh, okay, well, we'll fix it. Well, whatever. But how do you have that ability to give constructive criticism and not, demoralize the designer? I
don't know about the not demoralizing. My retirement gig, I'm gonna open a incubator called Dream Killer, where we bring a practical approach to everybody's kind of investment criteria. But it's a challenge. I go into projects. A lot of my projects are adaptive reuse.
Yeah.
So Allison Hall, RiverWalk, have a 100-year-old hotel. Well, I have a 100-year-old hospital that turned into an office building that had 5 additions to it that's now historically preserved for some reason. It's got ephes. There's literally styrofoam as part of this historical preservation. Yeah. And I had architects come and say, we're going to do all sorts of stuff. And I have to just say, it has to be a more practical approach.
Yeah.
I just I don't have that filter that you have, Christian. I'm not blessed with that.
I don't know about that. That's just not great sometimes.
So it's just taking a practical approach and just saying, look, this is what we have. This is the reality. These are the physics. We're all on Earth, as Jules Verne said, right? We're stuck here. There's nothing we could do about it. So we're stuck with financial, political things that you have to deal with. And that's a big part of it. It's also, hey, we could get this thing approved, but it would take us another 3 years to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I try to portray.
What's your philosophy on budget? Do you try to tell the budget ahead of time to the architect? Are you monitoring that as you go? Are you also pricing as you go? Because one of the things I can say about us that'll happen, and not just it's pretty much a lot of architects, is the client will come in, especially on the development side, and say, I want all of these things, and it has to be this, and it's going to be Class A, and it's going to be, all these wonderful things. And we will ask the question, well, what is your budget? And they'll say, well, we haven't really established a budget, but I know that I need these things. And then we'll go and we'll draw, we'll design, we'll do all of these things. And then pricing comes back and we're 6 months in and it's double of what, and, it'll turn around to the architect and they'll say, well, it's your fault. And we'll say, but you wanted all these things. You didn't know what your budget is. I get it. You needed to get certain things done to get a budget because maybe you don't know. How do you deal with that? Do you know, hey, I have a specific amount of money. This is what I'm spending. And I don't really care.
It's more about giving guidance to the architect ahead of time and saying, we're going to use this material. For example, Festival Hall, which you guys have designed, and the rendering is amazing. And it was an approach going in where we said, we're going to use these specific materials, giving them a sense of guidance versus saying, I want to have the most beautiful farmhouse look, in the world. And they come back and they don't recognize that it's $1,000 a square for that material. So working with the architect, giving him guidance, and then having conversations as the key is I see a lot of people that just let the architects run.
Yeah.
As opposed to having regular meetings along the way.
Yeah.
And having those conversations about, hey, if we use this material, we might not get that super shiny look, but we'll be, one grade down from that and we'll accomplish what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's much better to establish that up front because the worst thing for an architect is to say you want all these things, we'll design it, and then you come back and say, hey, this actually doesn't work for my budget. Let's just strip everything out of it. And so you strip it out and it doesn't look anything like it should have. It's probably, yes, you've saved the money, but you could have, from the beginning, gotten it to a better place from a design point of view or from an experience point of view, whatever that might be. But you've just stripped it down. And that's kind of the worst way. But you also... You partner with contractors a lot too, right?
Yeah.
So I would assume that helps in terms of getting real-time budgets.
So we have a really good sense of how much things cost as we're giving the guidance to the architect. Me and my team just had a healthy debate on site because Allison Hall and the window budget. A couple people on the team where we're not going to replace all the windows. We're just going to replace a portion of it. This is a 100-year-old building. And so I insisted that we're going to replace all the windows with aluminum windows. We're sourcing them from a supplier in New York City. And sometimes you just got to get in the ground and roll up your sleeves. And so we are going to save about 50% on our window budget. I'm going to allocate that someplace else. But the way I source those windows is a fun story. I'm walking in the city one night and I see this truck getting unloaded and they're stacking windows inside the lobby of this building that they're going to build. And so I just asked the guy unloading, where's the supplier? I took a picture of the receipt, Nice. I drove to the shop a couple of weeks later and we're ordering 288 windows that way. And it was a good way to do it. So it's important. Talk to your team. People have different experience. I like to drive around and look at what's going on and looking up as opposed to just being on my phone.
Yeah.
That's the way I've sourced some of my best kind of folks.
Well, you're hands-on too, which it depends. That sometimes a developer is not hands-on, right? It's a team, and the team's spending the developer's money, right? And so, not that they don't care, but they're not as resourceful as you, right?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, a lot of development firms are incentivized to spend more money because they're getting a management fee and they're getting a percentage off of the cost of the project. We're using our own money. We don't have other people's money in these projects. So, we have tighter constraints, and we don't have access to the capital markets as, bigger organizations do.
Yeah. Yeah. So as an architect, how can, as you're looking at maybe potential new developments or future developments, how can an architect help on the development side? Like, what can we do to make your life better? What are the things that we can provide you so that you can say, hey, yes, I definitely want to go forward and buy this piece of property or buy this adaptive reuse building? Like, what can we do? What are real practical things that we can do? Yeah,
I mean, let me put my dream killer hat on for a second and say what you shouldn't do, right? And I've hired a lot of firms. I've worked probably with over a dozen architecture firms in over my real estate career. And the biggest mistake that architects do is they throw out, and so I've hired 12 plus firms, but I've probably shopped 40. Yeah. Just to give you a sense of it, right? And the mistake that organizations do is that they throw out this huge number. And it's all about getting to the finish line, but there's no due diligence up front. And so the firms I like to work with are firms that kind of give me, hey, there's a due diligence, there's a discovery period. Do we gel?
Yeah.
Right? Because as painful as it's working for a bad architect, a bad client, I'm sure, is even more painful and not profitable.
Yeah.
What I tell all my subs, what I tell my contractors, what I tell all my professionals, the engineers is another world. We could dive into that. Mm-hmm. Is let's get off the job quick, right? If you can get in and out, it's a higher profit margin, I assume, for you.
Absolutely.
Right. Versus a job lingering, then you're fighting, these situations. And again, like you brought it up earlier, don't walk into a client and over design something. You should have a sense of what their budget is. Yeah. And if you don't, you really should ask the question before you get there, because you're wasting your own time. So I think the thing that architects should do, design firms should do, is just start a staged approach, right? Create a situation where you're courting the client's courting you, make sure that you gel, understand, do you need other resources, right? I had dinner with your partner, Scott. And, one of the things that frustrates me, is also something I think architects should do, is work more closely with the other professionals, the engineers specifically, because nothing is more frustrating to me as a developer when the architect's saying he's waiting on the engineer's blaming the architect because you over-designed this thing. I can't make this work. Yeah. And then there's another civil engineer in the process. So those are the two things I would say, is really have a process where you're getting to court the client a little bit, build that stage, you phase the project a little bit, and then make sure you have a better, really good sense of who the other professionals are.
Yeah, listen, I would love to do more projects where we're hired for the initial phase, right? And then hired again for the next phase. First of all, it's better for us. It's better for you. It's very difficult to price a job. Let's say someone wants to build an office building. They say, we want a 100,000 square foot office building. Just, price it today. And based on what, right? We don't know anything. Yeah. We don't know the budget. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know, how complex the interior is going to be. And you're expected to price this thing, and 2.5 years from now, it's going to be built and everyone's going to be happy. And so you're really, truly throwing a dart at the wall, right? Yeah. I mean, we will run hours and try to price it out that way. We'll do what we think might be the budget if we haven't gotten it. So a percentage of construction cost, but that varies so much at this point. It used to be 8% for architects. Now it's probably 2% for architects. And so we'll try to run it as many different scenarios, or a price per office we've tried, or if it's residential, a price per residential unit, right? There's ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you just say, well, this feels about this. It's going to take about this. And let's hope we're right. Sometimes we're right and it's and we'll have an amazing profit from it. But sometimes we're wrong. And then we're in the position of where we have to, go back and ask for more money. So it'd be much better to do, hey, engage us for schematic design. We'll figure it out. Then we'll tell you, okay, this works. And then this is what our next phase is going to be. And you tell us, okay, that works for your budget and our budget. And then we all work together. It's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that.
That's absolutely the right approach is that phased approach. Hire the professional for schematic design. Make sure that you like where they're going. Because, whoever you are, whether it's a home or a residential development or commercial development, it's a different style.
Yeah, very much.
The other part of it too is the politics of local towns, right? Does the architect understand the hometown situation?
Yep.
New York is very different from New Jersey, is very different from Texas. In my healthcare career, I built 50 MRI centers in 20 states.
Yeah.
And we had the designer doing all of the CDs in-house, but we hired local architects just to understand what are we missing. Does the local fire code official want an extra fire detector, smoke detector, where it's not technically required by code? You give it to them.
Well, everyone always thinks New York City is super complicated, but it's actually one of the easiest places to work. Everything's done online, and you either meet all of the criteria or you don't, and you're done.
I'm developing my next project is going to be on the South Shore of Staten Island. We're going to be building a sports recreation place over there. We've got 7 acres on the water. And I'm looking forward to that kind of black and white approach.
Yep. Compliant or you're not.
That's it.
You're in. Yep.
And if we need a variance, we go. There's a really clear process. And do we take the shot at the variance or not?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And the timeline and everything associated with it. I totally agree. So I'd love to get into RiverWalk a little bit. It's you've kind of, so you started with Russell Hall, and then what happened? You were able to purchase additional land, bid on additional land?
Yeah, so I bid on about 5 properties in all. We won 2.
Okay.
I'm not sore about Netflix, right? But if Netflix wasn't happening, I would have continued to try to acquire more property.
Okay.
I look at Netflix as it just created worldwide recognition of this little town of Oceanport that I happen to live in, which is an awesome place to be. Monmouth County is one of the best places in the world to live.
Agreed.
But so what happened with RiverWalk is I bid on the parcel at the time was called Allison Hall because the Allison Hall is part of the property. And that was pre-Netflix. And we had done the analysis really to support the bankers behind it, but I'm pretty good at sensing the market, being that I'm there, and I knew there was an opportunity there. And we really haven't changed what we're developing post Netflix, which is remarkable.
It's a compliment.
It's a testament to what the market is, how great it is, and we're still trying to stay hyper local is what we're trying to do. And and I wish it wasn't the case, but the only national kind of name that you're going to see there is a coffee chain.
Right.
I was hoping that we would get a hyper local one, but I think and I respect them. They have their formula for what they want, so they can keep their product consistent.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they very much.
Yeah, and I love their product. I would love to have them there. And even in other 2 other really local coffee shops, but they're really stuck to their and rightfully so. They really do a good job, and they're masters of their craft because of that.
So what's the overall concept for RiverWalk? Yeah,
so RiverWalk, again, the concept is that we are within walking distance. There's 6,000 people. Like it's denser than some neighborhoods in Brooklyn, wow. And depending on where you are. And there's so much more. The other part of it is that it's truly live, work, play, right? I've got my office building there. There's a couple of other office buildings there. Netflix is obviously going to come there. Adjacent to our property, there's 600 new homes that are built. Brand new homes in Monmouth County. And then if you go onto the other side of the parcel, there's another 400 or 500. So there's about 1,100 new homes that are being built there. So the concept for Riverwalk is, again, live, work, play. We can go there in the morning. You can loiter. You can walk your dog. I walk Chopper, twice a week along the promenade, which is incomplete. But you're going to go there in the morning, walk the dog, come back, work out, go have lunch, go work, come out for a wedding, stay in a hotel, and just really just keep people in the community. I'm proud about it because, the adaptive reuse, I've read studies that, the concrete, new concrete impact on the environment is tremendous. Reusing Allison Hall and what's going to be the waterfront banquet facility. There's a lot of concrete in those buildings.
Oh, yeah. Those are old school.
Additionally, we don't have to drive as much, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to, I'm planning on buying a golf cart, an electric golf cart to go back and forth. We're going to have electric golf shuttles on the property to take people to the train. The train is a few hundred feet away from the site. So again, we're creating a situation where people could come, hang out, and just chill, drink, work out, work, whatever it is that keeps them happy.
Yeah, there's gaming facilities there. There's obviously restaurants, bars.
Yeah, we're gonna have Festival Hall is one of the first bigger eateries that's coming there. It's a family entertainment kind of concept, but it's built around music. So we're going to have an amazing kind of sound system. We're going to bring musicians in there. We're going to have, 200 to 500 person events where you can have on the waterfront, music venues. There's going to be a small arcade, an awesome bar, and we're going to have great local food as well.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. What was other than living there, how did you think of this, right? How did you say, okay, I'm going to buy these buildings and I know that I can turn it into this family entertainment, live, work, play area? What was your thought process behind that?
It's just the need. You look at other developers who are not from the market, and they're building traditional strip centers that are built for the national chains. And, it's not pleasant, right? Yeah. Getting into them is not pleasant. You've got to make 3 left turns and, right turns in New Jersey to get to a left.
Yeah.
And we wanted to create something, number one, that we're proud of, that we're going to look at and, we're going to say, hey, this is beautiful, right? And we're adding to the community. Number two, it's something that the community needs. I'm also not a fan of, forcing something into a market where the market's doesn't need it. Yeah. Knowing a lot of people being hyper local, we recognize that businesses don't want to drive to the Parkway. Yeah. I have a monster truck, a 2500 Dodge Ram. I can go on a tank of gas for 2 weeks, right? On that thing. And I can drive on E with the light on for about 3 days, which is amazing. So again, the concept that we have is making it hyper local, creating a situation where, the community is happy to be there and engage with other business owners and their customers.
Nice. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your origin story. What was your childhood like? Where did you grow up?
Yeah. So I grew up in Staten Island, New York, and it was just a natural kind of migration pattern, to New Jersey.
Monmouth County is a lot of stuff. My entire neighborhood. I'm like the one from New Jersey or from Middletown. They're like, wow, you grew up.
Let me see your birth certificate. So I grew up in Staten Island, New York. And it was a great childhood experience. You think of Staten Island, you think of New York, you think of like really dense. We didn't lock our doors when we were kids, right? So I had a really unique experience. I would wake up, I'd go, to my neighbor's house for breakfast. They'd come over. No one announced anything. You never know who was going to be in your living room. Your friend could be sitting downstairs. So it was a really cool childhood in terms of that kind of like, American, you think about that in the Midwest or something, but to have that in New York City was really good. And then the proximity to New York also was cool. What I think also helped me be the entrepreneur that I am, or my parents were entrepreneurs. I'm first generation Egyptian. My parents came here with not a dollar in their pocket. Wow. But also being in New York City, seeing cultural diversity helped me recognize, hey, there's another way to look at something. Yeah. Right. And that was one of the things that attracted me to the school that our kids go to, is just that it's a very diverse kind of community there. And then so when I again, kind of the situation here. I learned these lessons a couple of times in life. Graduated from high school, went to NYU. I was there for about a semester. I had to commute because I couldn't afford to live in the city. And then the reason I left and finished up at St. John's was final week. I had a car, little compact car. I grew up in the city. I drove a double clutch straight job truck in the bottom of the First World Trade Center when I was like 17 years old. Oh, wow. It's another story. But my car got towed. Right. And it was the most miserable day of my life. I was cramming for exams the next day. I was just so stressed out. I'm like, I'm not doing this. So I transferred to St. John's. It was a hard conversation with my dad, one of the hardest ever. Paid my way through St. John's. And that was also a really good experience because it helped me kind of stay grounded in New York. And, I was working my way through college. And then when I graduated from St. John's, I got a knock from Goldman Sachs, and when you get a knock from Goldman Sachs, you go, right?
Yeah.
And so I went.
The janitor, you go there.
But in college, what it also allowed me to do was I started my first business in college. So when my friends were delivering pizza, I was selling and buying used MRI equipment in college, right? So I worked in the equivalent of a boiler room. Literally everybody in that call center was trained by Michael Milken, right? And I don't know if they like him now. People don't like him. I don't know. But these guys were like amazing salespeople. And so I just learned how to sell, but I was also very technologically savvy, right? I always taught myself technology. And so it helped me shine in that business. And so I was outperforming these guys. And so one day, final week again, all the drama happens during finals in college. I had an opportunity where I was buying an MRI in Pennsylvania, and I had a buyer myself in Mexico. And there was a lot of money involved. So I went to one of my colleagues, right? Now, this guy was like 55 years old. I'm 18. And I said, hey, I got final tomorrow. We got to close this deal. I will split the commission with you. The guy screwed me out of the commission. Ooh. It was the best thing that ever happened in my life. And I thank him every day, right, for that. And the lesson I learned was, hey, I ended up just packing up, started my own business in my parents' basement. Had my mom actually calling for me. I taught her how to cold call while I was in school, and the business started flourishing. Went to Goldman Sachs, and I kind of kept that business going. And then I had another recognized I was there, and it wasn't the place for me. Great, I learned a lot at Goldman. I'm very grateful for that opportunity there. But I recognized that culturally, I'm an entrepreneur, and so I went back to the healthcare business.
Did you always know, or was there a point in college like, hey, I want to be an engineer, hey, I want to be a tech programmer, hey, I want to be an accountant? Did any of that ever cross your mind, or it was always, I'm just going to do my own thing? No matter what, I'm just going to figure out my own thing along the way?
I was fascinated with early trading. Right. Okay. And one of the reasons I think I got the job at Goldman, this was 1998. Remember, like early high frequency trading was happening. I was fascinated with it. I was pretty good at it. Yeah. And so I love numbers. I love doing budgeting. It's just something that I enjoy. I'm also pretty creative in some respect, both, in construction and financials. But that was something I wanted. And then when I went to Goldman, I realized, wow, I can't. I'm not really this political person, thus dream killer, right? Yeah. So I recognize, hey, I was at that moment in time that I recognize, hey, I just got to work for myself, and I want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So how does the MRI thing happen?
I was in college. I had to do it. I literally just needed a job. My dad knew a guy, and everything happens in Staten Island and Jersey. A guy. So my dad got me a job at a place. My first job was counting comic books. And as a kid, you're like, wow, this is awesome.
These guys are like that.
Yeah.
Here.
I was counting comic books, and there was this 100,000 square foot warehouse where we were packing the vans full of comic books. But it was a little monotonous for me. I couldn't handle the lack of excitement or drama. Yeah. So then I ended up taking that job as a cold caller.
Okay. Interesting. So let's talk about TetherView, because it's TetherView has been referenced as the titan of its industry by Harvard Business Review. What prompted you to start this business? Also explain a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Tom Cowan, who's a retired professor at Columbia University, says an entrepreneur, a good sign of an entrepreneur is somebody who knows the market cold. And what I recognized, the reason I started TetherView was there was a huge market opportunity. This was 2012, right before Sandy. I started having this concept of, hey, I knew I wanted to get out of healthcare because healthcare was a sinking ship. And I built this IT kind of environment that I recognized the market needed. And so over the next 4 years, 2016 or 17, I got my first client. And we built a product that I felt the market needed. And there was this just gaping hole that I saw, kind of like the gaping hole that I saw Russell Hall. I'm like, this is going to be something. So I just saw this market opportunity and I just jumped on it.
So what is TetherView?
So TetherView provides IT services to middle market businesses.
Okay.
And we take a holistic approach to IT. So most organizations, when they think of IT, they think, I'm going to go buy a security tool. I'm going to go buy email product, or, I'm going to buy a compliance tool. I'm going to buy physical hardware. We look at IT holistically. You can't think of security, productivity, and compliance in a vacuum. So we bundled 65 different solutions and services into a single offering, and we provide it at a flat fee. Very disruptive to the market. The market doesn't understand it because they're used to buying it in this way where I'm going to pay this guy $5, I'm going to pay this guy $9, I'm going to pay this guy $50, and next thing you know, you're spending $400 a person per employee per month.
Yep.
And when I say that number, some people challenge me, and then we go to the mat and we pull out a financial model and we say, all right, what did you pay for this last year? And I don't know. Or what did you pay for that? Well, I bought that 3 years ago. Well, that was a cost. Are you amortizing that properly? So TetherView really is built to, again, fill a void in the market and provide a great service to middle market businesses who are struggling with IT.
Is it, and I know just from a little bit of experience, the whole virtual desktop, right? This idea that you don't actually need powerful computers in your, whether it's a laptop or a desktop or something like that, that you're actually pulling a video essentially off of a larger server, let's call it, cloud-based.
Yeah, and that's where the name TetherView came from, is you're tethered to the view of your desktop is where we came from. It's also the lack of URLs, so it's really hard to get a company name these days. But the virtual desktop is our core competency,
okay.
Where we've got, I think, 1,200 users right now in Pakistan that are developing code for 5 or 6 different clients, and they're using a tremendous amount of compute power. And they're in Pakistan, and they're handling sensitive data. The data never leaves the United States. Mm-hmm. Our clients are in full control of what their users overseas can do. And the overseas users are so happy to have it because now they can work, at blistering rate compute power without having to worry about data coming in and out.
Interesting.
And use,
so their work, yeah. So I guess technically it's all here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I would have to think that COVID was also good for TetherView, right? This idea that, one day now we're all working from home, that kind of stuff. What's been your experience, and where do you see that hybrid work model going these days? Do you see people going back to offices more? Do you see it staying as is?
Yeah, hybrid work is it's here to stay, and certainly COVID was great for us. But if we look at TetherView, we are built on remote workforce, but it's appropriate use, right? So our tech team is 100% remote. 100% of our techs are remote. Our sales team is hybrid.
Okay.
And it's harder to manage the tech team being remote and building that culture. But because their roles are more defined, right, it allows us to hire great talent. I've got amazing talent on my team. I'm so proud of the team that we have. But they're everywhere. I got folks in Idaho. I've got folks in Kansas, in Washington, states all over the place. I've never met these people, unfortunately, in person, but they're happy because they get to work from home. IT is also a thankless job, right? No one's calling you to say, thank you, this is working great today. They're only calling you to say, I've got a problem, right? So letting them work from home also allows them to handle the hours. That's a challenge. The sales team is a different story. I struggled during COVID, to be honest. Now, we were fortunate because the inbound activity was going. And of course, I'm an entrepreneur. I want to scale the business. I'm a capitalist. But we struggled with remote sales because building the culture, the little nuances that you get, just that personal interaction is critical. And that's hard to do for a sales and marketing team. So to answer the second part of your question, I think hybrid is here to stay. I think people should go to the office more. When I talk to any organization, whether it's education, legal, accounting, they are struggling to train the next breed, the next round of folks that are coming in. And the folks that are accelerating in their career path are the ones that are reporting to the office and showing up. Yep. And so people are like, why am I left behind? You're left behind because you're a good friend of mine, Les Bruns, who I met through Columbia, says, you could have a PhD in rocket science, but you might be unemployable, right? Because you have this bad culture about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell like nieces and nephews, anyone young, like go to the office, go 5 days a week. Even if nobody's there on Friday, just go. You'll excel in your career beyond all your peers just from being there.
Everyone has institutional knowledge, right? And that's what people, and again, the dream killer's coming out at me again, is folks tend to not appreciate that anyone in an organization can kind of give you some understanding or a different perspective. And that's my approach. I always look at anyone, wherever you're high or low. One of my colleagues said, Mike, you have a lot of friends in low places. And I said, no, these are the people that are getting it done, right? These are the folks you have to appreciate is the person who's actually turning the wrench. They understand it. That's the person who I want to talk to know, how do I make that better? Do I have to make the wrench better? Am I using the wrong bolt? Can I create some efficiency there? And that's where you got to really be on the ground and learn from those guys.
So on the opposite end of that, what's your feelings on AI and how it might affect, the programming side of TetherView?
Well, it terrifies me, quite honestly. So I just did an event in New York City at SL Green's headquarters with the former director of National Counterintelligence, a guy named Bill Evanina, Director Evanina. And the conference was about the impact of AI on cybersecurity. And the short story of it is, because I could talk about this for hours, the short story is that it makes a bad hacker or someone who's not even a hacker who just had nefarious thoughts, and it turns them into a criminal.
Wow.
And that could be an insider threat. It could be an external threat, but it makes people who are somewhat skilled or have a little bit of knowledge, it turns them into quote unquote experts. So that's the bad side of it. The good side of it is people should be using it every day.
Yeah.
It's a calculator.
Yeah.
So I don't know if your team appreciated it or not, but I used DALL-E to create the first iteration of Festival Hall.
Yeah.
And the prompt that I put in was, it was around the size. I knew that I wanted a material because I was thinking about budget. I knew about height. It saved us so much time, right? And I think it saved your team pain. I hope it did.
Yeah, it's we look at it as a same thing as a Pinterest board, or people coming with images that they like, or hey, I saw this when I was traveling in Europe. This is something I appreciate. For us, the more information, the better. Whether it's AI generated or you're just taking a picture of it, it helps us spur on ideas and narrow. As you said early on, one of the things that architects don't do well is narrow down the time. If you give an architect, 3 weeks, they'll take 5. But what we try to do at my firm is do it in the 3 weeks, because it's better for us. It's better for the client. It's also better for us from a profitability point of view. The longer things take, the more drawn out it goes, the more iterations you do. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the morale of the project. It's obviously not good for the person paying the bills. So I agree. Listen, the more you can use AI to generate that upfront work, we're all for it. I agree. And for us, there may be something down the road with the construction documents or with certain, QA/QC checkpoints and things like that, where we can use that knowledge that I think would be wonderful for us. And maybe we make, less mistakes or miss less things on a drawing,
I mean, TetherView is an IT company, so we're way ahead of the game. Construction and healthcare are way behind laggards in terms of, and accounting too, laggards in terms of adoption of technology.
Yeah.
But at TetherView, we have every one of our tech team at a certain level. They have a prompt built into their platform. And it's not there to check on them. It's there to make them more efficient. Most of my team were salaried, right? And so I want them not to be at their desk 12 hours a day, right? They're happier. They're better. We've have studies where if I get people more efficient and working less and just, our product's going to be better. So we encourage AI. And so we're proud of this one. She's a member of the team. It's really great to say she as a member of the team too in technology. She's an AI developer. And so she's always thinking, and we're always challenging her, how do we integrate AI into this? How can we make sure that we're better? And it's not just in terms of security and processing data. We're trying to use it for more creative things as well.
Interesting. So back to cybersecurity, kind of last thing. Digital bunker is a term that you came up with. I know just from knowing you and a lot of the talks that you give on cybersecurity. I know it seems like a kind of a basic question, but why is cybersecurity so important either to a business or to an individual? And what are some simple things that we can do to embrace it or to use it correctly or to be mindful of it?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest example I could say why is cybersecurity so important to people is if you look at the hospitals, and I don't want to name names, but there's a couple here in Monmouth County where they had to divert the ER for days. It's a distraction. It's you're stuck. No one needs cybersecurity until you need it. No one recognizes I've got to do this. But if you look at some of the hospitals that were hacked and shut down, the ER got diverted. What does that do for them? Revenue, morale. The patients aren't going to go there. Well, what do you mean? I'm having a heart attack, or I've got this severe wound. I can't go there. Why not? Well, we shut down the ER because I can't process your documents. The other reason cybersecurity is important is everything is digital. So there's a lot of folks that take this assumption out there that my information is everywhere anyway. So what's the big deal? Again, it's a disruption thing. You have IP potentially. You want to keep that IP. You have your client lists. So it's important, just to keep your information locked down. And the origin of the digital bunker is that we create this digital bunker for our clients where we're reducing your IT footprint. You know where your data is going. You know how it's getting there. You know who touched it. So you don't have to worry about that employee who deleted 2 terabytes of data the night before he puts in his resignation. It happens. We've had it happen a couple of times.
I'm sure.
And let me tell you, for our clients who have us, it changes the dynamic when that employee walks in and says, "Hey, I'm resigning." "Oh yeah, great. Can you please? Why did you delete that 2 terabytes of data?"
That's right. That's a gotcha for sure. So as we wrap up, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, I think I want to stress how, Monmouth County is such a great place.
Awesome.
And I recently commemorated a mural to the fort and the history of the fort. So what I hope that doesn't happen when Netflix comes is that we lose the history of the fort. As you mentioned, the Rosenbergs were on the base. They stole nuclear secrets in post-World War II and selling them to whoever I think they could get. And I think they were kind of detained. The rumor is they were detained in Russell Hall at one time. Cool. I've got to find that out. But the cool thing about why I'm also proud of the fort is I'm a tech guy. I love technology. The fort was really the genesis of a lot of technological innovation, not just in the radios, but in cyber as well. It was the command center for SATCOM. So satellite command, and CCOM was the heart of it. Satellite communications were there. And another little known fact is before the Air Force, right behind Russell Hall, the parade ground that Netflix is going to have to keep preserved, was the first airfield So the first time that we called an airport, for military use was there. And on that field and on top of Russell Hall was where they developed and experimented with ground-to-air radio communications.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
I can tell you, knowing a little bit about Netflix, that the history is important to them, and there's a lot that they want to preserve ultimately going forward, which is good news for all of us in Monmouth County for sure. How do you have time to get all this in with all the businesses, all the stuff? How do you pull all this
I'm going to ask you the same question.
I don't know. I just go from one to the next.
I look, family's priority to me. As busy as people think I am, I'm actually very, very consumed by hanging out with the kids, going to school events, traveling with them as much as I can. So I'm just wake up at 6 o'clock and kind of start going and plan my day and hope that there's not too many distractions along the way.
I love it. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the Anti-Architect podcast. To learn more about Mike himself, you can visit his LinkedIn profile. To learn more about TetherView, you go to tetherview.com. And there's a great website for RiverWalk, which is riverwalkcenter.com. And you can see all the cool renderings and animations that Colin did from our office. So
yeah, exciting. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.